And we're studying, moving on to Hayom Yom, which is a book that the Rebbe published. It means from day to day. The Rebbe wrote this book in the year 1943, a message for each day. We study it every single day because it's got a message, a spiritual message for every single day of the year. It's a very powerful concept that we Chabadniks believe that within the day that the Rebbe chose to give a certain teaching, it's connected to the message of that particular day, every year. I see Daniel is asking the name of the book. I'm not sure if you're asking about this book, Duties of the Heart, by Feldheim Publishers. It's a 2-volume set. Or if you're asking about the next book, which is this one, From Day to Day, Hayom Yom, published by Kehot Online Publications. Anyways, here we are. Today is actually Rosh Chodesh. Today is the beginning of the month of Passover. It's the beginning of the month of Nisan, the month of miracles. We're moving from the month of Purim, of Adar, the month of joy, into the month of Nisan, which is the month of miracles. May we all experience extraordinary miracles with our health and wellness and prosperity. All the blessings that we need from God right now at this time with the eradication of this virus. Let us move on to Hayom Yom. So the Hayom Yom reads as follows. We're down to one Hayom Yom because there's only 1 month. Last month was a double month because of leap years sometimes. But now we're moving on into the Hayom Yom. We don't say Tachnun all month, so there's no. This is a month which is filled with joy. There's no supplications in our prayers. Every day we recite a Nasi prayer, which basically means that in temple times, in the tabernacle times in the desert, when the Jewish people built the tabernacle with Moses, the head of each tribe brought a consecration offering on behalf of his tribe every day of the first 12 days of this month. And therefore, in commemoration of that, we read a special paragraph relating to the president of each tribe. And we actually say, if my soul is from that tribe, there's 12 tribes of Israel, if my soul is from the tribe that offered the consecration offering today, then may be considered as if I did that as well. So the Hayom Yom goes as follows. After saying the Nasi, the presidential offering of the day, we say the Yehi Ratzon, which is printed in Torah or Sidur, Kohanim and Levim also say. My father instructed his brother-in-law, Rebbe Moshe Herdenstein, who was a Kohen, to say Yehi Ratzon after the Nasi, noting that even a Kohen Levi must say it, for it is related to Ibur. Basically, what this means is like this. The concept means that there's 12 tribes of Israel. But if you're a Kohen or a Levi, it means you're definitely coming from the tribe of Levi. Now, the way we do the Nasi blessing is that we say, if my soul comes from this tribe of Zevulun or Reuven or Shimon, then may it be considered as if today I brought my offering together with my president. But if you're from the tribe of Levi, if you're a Kohen or a Levi, and you're definitely from the tribe of Levi, then why would you need to say, if my soul comes from this other tribe? Why would you need to say that? You know that you're from the tribe of Levi. So today's Yom Yom says that because all souls are interconnected, every single Jew is responsible for every other Jew. We're interrelated. Therefore, even a Kohen who knows his tribal ancestry to this day is still obligated to say that same prayer, to say that if my soul is related to this tribe or that tribe, then may be considered as if my soul brought the offering because we're all connected. And now we continue with the study of Talmud. We're moving to our daily regimen of Talmud study. Again, we're going to try to keep this down to a minimum of a maximum of 25 minutes. We're going to try to end it at 9:30, so that way you know to plan your day. We start at 8:30. We're doing 3 sessions of Torah study. The first is fear and anxiety conquering. The second one is Talmud. The third one is Introduction to Jewish Spirituality and Meditation. 3 sessions, 25 minutes each. You know what you're in for. You know how long it's going to take, and there's a beginning and a clear ending, so that it doesn't have to be endless, and we can have a more of a focused regimen of Torah study. Okay, let's do this. So we're continuing on in the Talmud. We're studying a new section on page 75. If you do have the book, this is by Otzgrel Publications. It's called the Ein Yaakov. Also encouraging you to buy this book online. We're starting a new paragraph 20 on page 75. The Gemara continues its discussion of the importance that we must show to prayer. The Gemara continues. Rabbi Chelbo said in the name of Rav Huna, whoever sets a specific place for his prayer, that is, if he always prays in the same place, the God of Abraham, our forefather, will help him as he helped Abraham. And when he dies, they will say about him, woe for the loss of this humble person, woe for the loss of this pious person, who was from the students of Abraham, our forefather, who designated a special place for prayer. And from where do we know that Abraham, our forefather, set a place for prayer? For it is written, Vayashkem Avraham baboker el hamakom asher amad sham et pnei Hashem. Avram arose early in the morning to the place where he had stood before God. He went back to the same place where he had stood before God. Avram went to the place where he had stood a day earlier, pleading with God not to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, as described there in Genesis. And standing in this verse to the place where he had stood means nothing other than prayer. We see the term standing to clearly refer to standing before God, as it states elsewhere in Torah. And Pinchas stood and prayed. This is in Psalms 106. In Torah, the verbiage is very precise. When an expression is used in one context, it applies to all other contexts as well. So when it says by Pinchas that he stood and prayed, we understand that standing means prayed. So every time we see standing, it means also prayed. So we see that Avram went to pray in the same place that he had prayed previously, that is in the place that he had set for prayer. Now, this is very interesting because, here we are during this quarantine where we normally daven every day at 7:30 in the morning. We come together at shul, we daven together, and it's very important to have what's called a makom kavua, a set place. When you come to shul, you should always sit in the same seat. Every time you come, you shouldn't say, oh, well, today I'm going to sit here, today I'm going to sit there, today I'm going to sit in the talking section, the non-talking section, in the smoking section, and the lawyer section. Today I'm going to sit where I can see my wife. Today I'm going to sit where I can't see my wife. You shouldn't jump around like that every day in the same place, because a makam kavua, a established place, is very powerful for your connection with God, as we just saw in the Talmud, and we're going to explain it in just a few short moments. This is why some Jews get very offended when they come to shul and they see somebody else already sitting in their seat. So, that they get like really mad. And I want to tell those people that, if somebody's sitting in your seat, more important than your connection with God, by erupting with anger about somebody who's sitting in your seat, more important than that is showing God that you love God's children by being kind to the Jew who's sitting in your seat and sitting next to him. So that's just an interesting little point to point out of there. But during quarantine, here we are. Good morning, Hannah and Andy. Here where we are, we're sitting in quarantine, quasi-quarantine. I have to tell you, it's very unsettling for me to daven, not always at exactly the same time, and not always. Sometimes I'm davening at home, sometimes I'm davening at shul. It's a little unsettling. I can see the wisdom of davening at the same time and at the same place every single day. It's certainly very helpful. But I want to say to you that even when you're in quarantine and you're at home, I want you to designate a place in your home, which is the place of your daily prayer. Take a corner, a room, or something in your house, which is the place where you daven regularly. And that way you can focus your prayer. Even if you're not coming to shul, you have a place which is the place of your davening. In my home, I have an office. I have a corner of the office which has a stender, which is a place that it's like a lectern. When I daven in that spot. Otherwise, it's always a novel experience. When you're in the same place, when you're familiarizing yourself with the place where you daven, you can focus more easily on the meditation that you're supposed to be thinking about when you're davening. So that's an important concept. Now let's go a little bit deeper into it. But the one thing that I want to establish is the importance of having a makom kavua. I'm just going to plug in this computer before it dies. Give me a quick second here. Okay, there we go. Plugged it in. We are live. Let's talk about the importance of having a set place for davening. So the note here continues, a place for prayer. Why is designating a place, a set place for praying, so important? On a simple level, the Talmudic commentary Rashba explains that a person who prays must first focus his mind on the one to whom he is praying and be cognizant of his own lowliness and the exalted greatness of the one he petitions. A designated place for serving God aids in focusing one's mind in this way. It basically allows you to be humble, because if you're always davening in a different place, the weather, the draft, the air conditioning, the noise, it can be very distracting. But when you're in the same place, you develop a routine and you're able to get into the zone of davening. So that seems to be on a basic level the reason why it's so important to to daven in the same place. But the Maharal of Prague, if you've ever been to Prague and you've been to the old Neuschel, the Alt Neuschel. Good morning, Susan. Lovely to have you with us. If you've been to the Alt Neuschel, which is the old new shul in Prague. It's the one synagogue that the Nazis didn't destroy because they figured this was going to be the one that was going to be the museum for Judaism, for the extinct, God forbid, religion, race of the Judaism. That's why they kept this beautiful synagogue alive. It's the Maharal of Prague synagogue, and the legend goes that during the Middle Ages, when there were many blood libels, he lived in the 1500s, there were many blood libels against the Jewish people, which were accusations, false accusations, that the Jews were baking Christian blood into the matzah. Think about that. It happened just before Passover. What happened was that there was this rumor, propaganda, that the Jewish people were killing a Christian kid in order to bake his blood into matzah. And therefore, the verdict was out even before the trial. They decided to annihilate entire villages of Jewish people, God forbid. Before Passover was a very, very scary time. In fact, one of the origins for this is because the bread of communion, which somehow is supposed to represent, their God in the church, the bread of communion was left out. It's a wafer. It was left out for months, and it would develop these red spots. Now we know today it's mold. But they would say that the Jews came in the middle of the night and they beat the body of their God. So that's why this red stuff is blood. And they would also accuse the Jewish people of sacrilegious whatever. And good morning, Cookie. And they would then go out and annihilate the Jewish people, God forbid, before Pesach. So the Maharal of Prague created this Frankenstein concept, this humanoid called the golem. The golem of Prague, which till today is resting in the attic, which is blocked up and sealed, the attic of the Altneu Shul. So the Maharal was a great Kabbalist, to say the least. He created this humanoid thing. Anyways, Maharal explains, his teachings are always very, very profound. He actually is my 16th grandfather. My 9th grandfather is the Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe, and his 7th grandfather was the Maharal of Prague. So my 16th grandfather would be the Maharal. This is nice connecting with him, with my Zayda. So the Maharal explains that designating a place for prayer shows that one's prayer is not haphazard, but rather a fixed part of one's life, of one's daily service of God. This is important because the essence of prayer is connecting with God. If connection is to be strong and lasting, it cannot derive from a casual, haphazard practice, one that takes place here today and somewhere else tomorrow. It must derive from a fixed, deeply entrenched practice, one that requires a designated place to perform properly. This concept, my friends, is connected closely to the concept of the trust in God that we spoke about at the beginning of this lesson. Our relationship with God is real. And just like when a human being, when you're appealing to a human being, when you're trying to connect with your wife, let's say, imagine you're talking to her, was distracted, and imagine you were talking to your wife like this the whole time. It would be insulting. In the same way, when you talk to God and you're distracted, it's insulting. You talk to God like a mensch. You speak clearly to God. It was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai on his deathbed. Tells the students, great Roman era Talmudic scholar who saved Judaism. I wrote about him in my Friday email this week. He said to his students on his deathbed, when they asked for a final blessing, he blessed his students, may your fear of God be as great as your fear of human beings. May your fear of God be as great as your fear of human beings. They were like, Rebbe, don't you mean it backwards? And he said, no. If only you would treat God with as much respect as you treat a fellow human being, that would be good. When you speak to a human being, you look them in the eye and you don't speak to them like, you speak to them word by word. So to imagine you spoke to God like that, instead of mumbling words to them like we sometimes do with prayer, speak to them respectfully, slowly, one word at a time. Right? When I'm talking to God, I don't like to talk to anybody else in the middle, just like I wouldn't do with a normal human being. And he said, just like you wouldn't do a sin when somebody else is in the room, so too, if you knew that God is in the room, you also wouldn't do a sin. So when we have a set place for prayer, it means that you're talking to God in a clear way, in a nice way, without disrespect. That's how you should be talking to God. Reb Chaim Friedlander, and that's why, again, if you just joined us, I want you to know, even if you're not davening at shul you should definitely have a seat, which is your seat. that you always go to. But even if you're not davening at home, at shul, you're davening at home, you should have a set place where you daven. If it's on the balcony, if it's by the wall, if it's in whatever it is that you daven, it should be a set place. That is my davening place. And you actually sanctify that place by making it a place for davening. Rabbi Chaim Friedlander elaborates, prayer is a means of connecting with God. Such a connection involves recognizing the nature of one's relationship with God, a relationship of complete dependence on God and subservience to Him. In fact, the word tefillah derives from the Hebrew word meaning judgment. There is a Hebrew word which means judgment, thus indicating that praying, lehitpalel, which means to pray or to judge, is an exercise of self-judgment, the judgment of one's worthiness for God's kindness in accordance with one's feeling of dependence on God and his refusal to attribute any success to his own abilities. It's a sense of reliance on God. Okay, that's good. This awareness of one's relationship with God must be continually reinforced so that it may translate into a permanent attitude of self-negation before the greatness of one's master and provider. To allow such a permanent attitude to take root, one must be consistent and persistent in his prayer, a goal that is reached partly by setting a fixed place for an exercise that should be an anchor for his spiritual development. Folks, 1 second. Amazon is here. Just give me a quick second. I'm here alone. I'll be right back. Phew. The excitement of the quarantine, being here alone and having to open the door is cool. But thank you for your patience and understanding. Okay, so moving it along over here, what he's saying is basically the concept that he's saying here, this Reb Chaim Friedlander, is that approaching God in prayer is an attitude of humility before God. You know, there's a very powerful principle that that God can handle any human attitude except for one, which is arrogance. Humility is the lightning rod that draws God's blessing upon us, and arrogance is that which repels God's presence more than anything else. So when you approach God in an attitude of humility, you are drawing that blessing upon you in light speed, in whatever, God speed. Now, you'll notice this is why when we daven, we bow. You'll notice that when we do the Amidah, we put our feet together, we stand in humility before God. It's an attitude that is projected in our whole manner of prayer. And therefore, when you daven, if you're davening in the same place, you need to get into that zone, into that frame of mind. You're not just chatting like, hey, God, how you doing? What's up? It's not that kind of relationship. You've got to get into a mindset, into a frame of mind. And that's why a permanent place is considered so important, what we call a makom kavua, a permanent place. It's very, very important to be able to help us to reach that zone. You know how sometimes when you smell a certain smell, you're reminded of a certain person, for example, who always wears that perfume. Or when you have a certain experience, you have a flashback. Because we are human beings, we get programmed into certain ways. And I know when I wear a certain shirt, I feel like it reminds me of the person that gave it to me or a certain experience. So too, when we go to a certain place, we enter a certain frame of mind. By the way, this is the reason that we go 3 steps backwards before the Amidah and 3 steps forward to go into this new zone, right? Wherever we are. So that's what it's about. We human beings are creatures of habits. When you daven in a certain place, you not only spiritually sanctify that spot, but you also in your own mind familiarize yourself with that spot being conducive to meditation and to standing in the right attitude before God. Let's try to wrap this up over here. A person who adopts this mode of prayer is considered a disciple of Abraham, not simply on account of one small isolated practice of always returning to the same seat in the synagogue, but on account of allowing this practice to transform his entire spiritual character, to give new meaning to his prayers and lay the groundwork for an attitude toward life and a lasting connection with God. Having followed Abraham in the latter path of spiritual growth, one who sets a fixed place for prayer merits the same kind of heavenly assistance that was bestowed on Abraham in his time, and the God of Abraham will help him. When he dies, the Talmud says, this person will be eulogized as a humble and devout man, humble because of his self-negating connection with God, in which he recognizes that while powerless on his own, he lives and thrives only thanks to God's kindness and generosity, and devout because the trait of humility leads to devoutness. When humility takes one's ego and personal will out of the equation, one can concentrate on God's will and on seeking the ways to satisfy it fully. One final comment here from the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism. Alternatively, the Baal Shem Tov taught that a person's location follows the thoughts of his mind. In a place where a person's thought is, that is where he is located. You can transport yourself based upon your thoughts. Very powerful teaching of the Baal Shem Tov. A person may be standing in the synagogue and uttering words of prayer, but if his mind drifts away and starts thinking about what is going on in the street or in the market, his entire being is considered to be in those mundane places. This then is what the Gemara means when it says setting a fixed place of prayer. Not only a physical place of prayer, but a person must keep his mind focused on prayer so that his being remains in one place throughout. He means mentally you're supposed to have a fixed place of prayer. That when you daven, you're going in the zone. By the way, this is the reason we put the talis over our head. When we put the talis over our head, we have like these blinders that you can only see the prayer book. And I'll put it even extra further over that I can focus only straight upon what's in front of me. I don't get distracted by what's around me when I daven, so that I can really, really get into that beautiful zone. For if he would allow his mind to wander, his place would not be fixed. And he would be at one point in the street, at another point in the market, and maybe sometimes he would also be in the synagogue. And that's the meaning that the Baal Shem Tov tells us of the importance of having a fixed place for prayer, not only a physical place, but also more importantly, a mental place of prayer. I just want to conclude with a beautiful story about a chassid by the name of, hey, Warren from the back of the bus, a chassid of the name of Reb Mendel Futterfass. Reb Mendel Futterfass was a Hasidic Jew. He lived in Russia and he was exiled to Siberia for the crime of teaching Torah in public. He was a chassid of the Rebbe and of the previous Rebbe. At one point, he found himself in Siberia for like 10 years of hard labor in the Gulag, in the Russian frozen wastelands and the forced labor camps. Long story short, he had a deep desire to have a private audience with the Rebbe, but he couldn't. I mean, he was in Russia. He was a 24-hour train ride from any normal civilization. There was no way to escape. So what he did was he closed his eyes and he walked himself through the spiritual preparation that he would have done had he been near the Rebbe. You know, he prepared himself about going to the mikvah and davening and meditating and, putting on his gartel and wearing his Shabbos clothes and then, preparing himself for a private audience with the Rebbe. And then he walked in his own mind, all in his own mind. He was probably in a prison cell or something. And he walked himself through the process of coming to the Rebbe. And there he envisioned himself standing in front of the Rebbe and giving the Rebbe his note with his questions. And he envisioned the Rebbe answering him. And he went through the whole process. Fast forward 10 years. When he came out of Russia and he finally was able to stand before the Rebbe, in an amazing turn of events, the Rebbe turned the conversation to each item that was on that list of questions that he had asked the Rebbe in his mind's eye. Very powerful, very, very powerful concept here that the Rebbe was kind of answering his questions 10 years later, sort of validating the transportation of himself in his mind's eye from Russia to where he was. There's actually another interesting story. There was a very famous Sephardic Kabbalist by the name of the Baba Sali. His real name is Rabbi Yisrael Abu Chatzera, Rabbi Yisrael of the carpet, which I think it's in Arabic, Abu Chatzera, or maybe in Aramaic means the carpet, because this guy, his ancestor had a story with a magic carpet. That's actually where it comes from. The magic carpet story comes from this Abu Chatzera family. They're a family of Sephardic Kabbalists. When one of them needed to go hundreds of years ago, he needed to go to Israel and he couldn't afford the ship's fare. So the story goes that he said to the captain, listen, if you want to let me on the boat, then I'll just follow you. He followed him on this magic carpet. And ever since then, the family has been called Abu Chatzera, the master of the carpet. Very Kabbalistic, to say the least. So anyways, what happened here is that Rabbi Yisrael Abu Chatzera, the Baba Sali as he's known, he lived in Ashdod. And at one point, somebody came to the Rebbe for dollars, and he said to the Rebbe, I'm going to Ashdod, to Israel. So the Rebbe said, send my regards to the Baba Sali. The guy comes to the Baba Sali a few days later, and he says, I have regards to you from the Rebbe. So the Baba Sali says, I saw him last night. We study every Wednesday evening. Now, this is obviously before FaceTime and Facebook Live. So whatever that means, that they would study every Wednesday evening, the Rebbe and the Baba Sali, sounds amazing. Point is, what the Baal Shem Tov is telling us, you are where your mind is. The question I want to leave you with today is, where is your mind? Where do you live? Do you live at work? Do you live in the Holy Land? Do you live in a dark place? Or do you live in a beautiful place filled with light, love, faith, and trust in God? The question is only one that you can answer. Folks, as mentioned earlier, through this quarantine, I want to respect your time and thank you for joining me for Torah study. So we do daily a regimen of 3 sessions. We study the first session is Gates of Trust, 25 minutes. Second session is Talmud for 25 minutes. And the third session is Introduction to Jewish Spirituality and Meditation through prayer for 25 minutes. If you haven't done so already, I'd like to ask you please to like our YouTube page. To subscribe to our YouTube page. Because once we reach 100 YouTube subscribers, we get benefits from YouTube. For example, to allow us to make a very easy link to let people see us on YouTube. For example, youtube.com/Jewish Gardens will be ours once we hit 100 subscribers. So if you can do so, take 5 seconds of your time. Just go to YouTube, go to Chabad Palm Beach Gardens and click subscribe, the big red button on top, subscribe. And that way we're very close. I think we're at 75 right now. If we could just hit 100, it would make it a lot easier for us to share Torah study here through YouTube. And that way I want you to know that you can actually follow. We're going to be uploading the various classes of Talmud, of Gates of Trust, and of spirituality and meditation through prayer to our playlists on YouTube. So that way you'll be able to see all the classes that you missed all in one place. So for if you don't mind, just please click the subscribe link on the YouTube page of Chabad Palm Beach Gardens. That's Chabad Palm Beach Gardens on YouTube. I'm going to sign off right now so that I can re-sign up in 2 seconds. I'm going to go straight back on so that by 10 o'clock we could be finished our Torah study. That way every day, we start at 8:30 sharp, hopefully Jewish time. And then we finish at 10 o'clock. So we have 3 sessions of 25 minutes each, roughly. And that way you can know that this hour and a half is an hour and a half of Torah study, and you can go on with your day. I don't want to be endlessly teaching Torah here because it's not respectful of your time. So with that, I'm going to sign off, and thank you again for joining me very, very much here this morning. We'll be right back just in 2 seconds. Don't go away with the Introduction to Jewish Spirituality and Meditation through prayer coming up right now.